Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Another very special episode. I have another very special guest. I'm very privileged to have Gary Blackman on, GB Runner 21. Is that right?
GB, yeah, everyone doubts me. GB underscore runner 2021. Close.
2021 on Instagram. So go, mate. We always get that one in early. So go and give Gary a follow. Very motivational account. Very real account, which goes through the hopefully similar stuff to me in terms of delivering the realness of the journey and what it all takes. So yeah, please go and give Gary a follow. First and foremost, we'll get that out of the way. So I first, as I mentioned before, on numerous of these things, I first came across Gary when I started to get a few more followers on Instagram, particularly when I started to get more into marathon running and things like that. And particularly, I gravitated towards Gary because we're at a similar station in life. Let's use that expression. And as most of you know, my thing has always been helping people that are in, let's call it middle age for the purposes of whatever that means nowadays, to feel that they can still run and actually can run marathons and as Gary will talk about beyond that, which is certainly something I can't do. So yeah, that's why I've definitely brought Gary on to talk about his experience and background and to perhaps give some words of wisdom about how we can all perform better even as we are approaching what's called middle age. So how are you, Gary?
I'm good. Yeah, not too bad.
Brilliant.
End of a week.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, yeah. Very privileged to have you on, and I appreciate you taking the time. So the first thing I wanted to ask really was, where did we start? Where does your journey with running begin, and how did we find ourselves here?
So running, I guess for me, was in the late 90s. I
Yeah.
started, maybe not so seriously, but I used to play football quite a bit,
Right.
and played goalkeeper as county level, and played a fair bit. And then I kind of fell out of playing myself in my low 20s, and then started coaching uh, kids teams.
Right.
I was a manager of a kids team and coach for a couple of years, and then kind of drifted away from that a little bit with work and moving away. And then I think just on the spur of a moment, in the days where, and you might remember this, days when you used to have to enter races by finding them in either magazines and sending in a stamped address envelope.
Yeah.
Uh, how times have changed.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I think I found a half marathon actually in my local paper. Back in, I can't even remember how long ago it was, about 95, 96 probably.
Right.
And just done it on the spur of a moment without much training.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed it, but didn't do any events for a few more years on that, and then kind of picked it up a little bit in the late 90s, where I started to kind of run a bit more regularly, started to chase some of the times,
Yeah.
etc. And then over the next 2 or 3 years, kind of set all my I could say my current PBs, but we'll talk about the one on the weekend as well. But
Oh, definitely. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
yeah, all my previous PVs were done almost all in the same year in 2000, so a long time
Right.
away. And then since then, I've been running consistently. I say consistently most of the time throughout that. How many every years that is? 20, 25 years now.
Yeah.
But had breaks. I've gone into cycling, gone into indoor rowing competitions a bit randomly. And competed at fairly reasonable levels at a very small sport there. But yeah, top and tail, got into triathlon a bit, and a lot of it has been kind of linked around to running injuries and stuff. What I've had was stopped me at the time, and I've
Yeah.
kind of running's always been my love. But I always say to people is like, I love running. Running doesn't always love me,
Yeah.
and I've had a fair few bad injuries, which I've managed to kind of battle my way through and keep going. But there's definitely been quite a few bumps in the road. But at the moment, the last 18 months or so, I've just come the opposite end now and seem to have come out of them having a really good period. I'm, fingers crossed it will last. As we all know, our bones get a bit more creaky at this age.
Yeah.
Recovery takes a bit longer. But yeah, so that's kind of my journey. I've gone from doing, I guess, when I was younger, 10Ks to marathons, and then now more, I've dabbled with ultras, marathons and ultras, to now this season having to go back on the road chasing times again. I just fancied after a couple of years of ultras to chase times, and it's going relatively well, okay, in comparison to what I was when I was 20, trying to work out maths, 27 years old when I done all my PBs.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so the recent PB, which we'll talk about a bit more in a second, that's the one so you've not broken any others. That's been the one you've broken from the age of 27. Are you
Yeah,
51? Did I get 51? Am I
52.
52? Okay,
52.
good. Phew, I went
Yeah.
under. That's good.
Appreciate it. Take a
Woo.
few more off.
Well, yeah, I was good. Yeah, I know it was 50 something, so I went conservative. So you've just broken a PB that you had from the age of 27 to 51.
Yeah, so literally done the Brighton half marathon 5 days ago,
Yeah,
and I kind of knew it's not my main aim this year. My main aim is the Brighton Marathon in April, because
yeah,
I felt looking at my PBs, I always find the further I go, the slower I get in comparison. I know obviously you slow down, but when you look at your predicted times and what you should do
yeah.
on like a 10K or 10 mile or whatever, I should be far quicker at the marathon than I actually am. So
Okay.
in my head, the marathon was the one to chase, if anything, this year, and the
Okay.
half marathons come as a byproduct of it. I had a good 10K performance in February, and I thought, do you know what? That's going to put me close to my half marathon,
Yeah.
and let's push myself. And for me, I rinsed myself. I didn't have a good day. I didn't feel great from the start, but I kind of kept on pace, and then you're doing all your mental maths in your head and how long you got and how many miles you got to do, as I'm sure you know. And I was like hanging on for dear life for the last 2 miles, and
Yeah.
and beat my 2000 PB by 13 seconds. So I've
Nice.
improved by half a second a year over half marathon
And
distance.
anyone
So
who knows a PB knows that 13 seconds, they'll take 13 seconds.
I'll take
What?
anything. I would have taken
Well,
one.
yeah, that's the thing, and that's the whole thing. And did you were you planning for a PB on that day?
Once I got within a couple of weeks of it, yes,
Yes.
I
Okay.
kind of knew I was capable. I guess I knew I was capable of it.
Yeah.
I ran last year, and this year I'm following like quite a rigid training plan, and I've got a strength coach now and working with
Right.
him as well. So things have been better. And last year I done the Brighton half, and I was sub 130, which again I haven't been for again 25 years, but I was, I think, 45 seconds off a PB, and I
Okay.
wasn't aiming for a PB in that race, but I had a good race. But then I always do a Chichester 10K in February as I like the race anyway, but it's a good marker to see where I am.
Right.
And I was 39:15, I think, which is 30 seconds quicker than last year. So in my
Yeah.
head, I was like, well, okay, 30 seconds over 10K is a reasonable amount of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
able to make up 45 seconds on a half. My predicted half should be around 125, 126, I think.
Okay.
And I went out at probably 127 pace, like low 127 paces, and then just suffered a bit for the second half. But I
Okay.
know I'll probably still improve it a little bit, I hope.
Oh, good. Oh, good. What did you do? What was the time again?
128:32.
Right. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And you mentioned again what I tend to go. I heard something, I'm going to go off on a tangent. You mentioned working with a strength coach. How long has that been going on for?
So we started, we met for Instagram, the beauty of Instagram.
Of course.
So Darren Linton Coaching, give him a shout
Yeah.
out. And we kind of developed a working relationship, what hopefully benefits us both. So he
Good.
agreed to coach me through to Brighton Marathon
Okay.
from that. And I'll be honest, I find it hard to get the strength work in
Of
because
course.
family life and whatever, but I've tried as hard as I can. And obviously I think there has definitely been some benefit from that
Yeah.
to get me where I am. I definitely feel a bit stronger.
Well, actually, one of the I get that's one of the key questions I get asked a lot about is strength training. Interestingly, it's quite a big topic. So what does that look like for you? How many sessions a week? What sort of things do you do?
So he's quite flexible in terms of I've got some plans. There's 3 different plans I can do within the week.
Right.
Always try and do 2 sessions if I can,
Two. Okay.
out of those two. But it's
Yeah.
flexible, and he's flexible enough to know, with family life and running, and as runners, I think the running takes priority over
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
everything else. And
Yeah.
I think when I started running, strength work for runners was never even thought about. So,
No.
but I think it's definitely shown these days that it's important. So there's that flexibility. So I tend to fill it in when I can, but I'm always finding it's generally when I'm tired or coming back from work and then have to go to the gym. So it's been a bit of a slog, but again, I feel it's been worth it to try and squeeze it in.
Yeah. And is that in a gym you do that? Do you go to a gym to?
Yeah, there's a home workout which I think I've done once or twice, but generally
Yeah.
I'm half a mile from a gym, so
Oh, okay.
just kind of get there easily to do it.
Good. And how many marathons have you done?
So including ultras, 55.
So that's all with ultras as well, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, so
Cool.
full. I'm gonna say 48, 45, 40, 47, 48 marathons, and then
Right.
but a lot of those are trail, not like road. So, um, but yeah, and then 7 or 8 ultras, I think, in the last
What's
few
the
years.
furthest you've gone in an ultra?
100K 3 times.
Right. Where was it? Where was it?
Race to the King.
Right, yeah, I've heard that
A
one.
few years ago, so one of the threshold events.
Yeah.
The Oxham Trail Walker, which I treated as a walk run, and then Thames Path as well.
Yeah.
But again, it was a walking event done as a kind of run event, really. So,
What was it that made you want to go into the real distance stuff, the ultras?
because at the time I was probably getting, I thought I was getting slower over road distances,
Okay.
and also this comes to one of my injuries. I had a bad injury 2.5 years ago, and I found that actually running on trails was a lot more conducive and manageable than
Right.
it was on
Yeah.
roads. And I'm finding that a little bit now is that because it's only this year I've really focused on just road running and road training and following a marathon plan on roads
Yeah.
generally. But I'm finding what I thought had been fully healed is still niggly a little bit, and it's with running on concrete basically, and the
Yeah.
impact just it's okay, but it's like not so conducive as running on trousers. Just doesn't seem to irritate it at all. So hence
Okay.
the little bit of a move to ultras, and also just to push the distance really. As I said, I thought my running the fast times are gone, so it's all about let's push the boundaries the other way and let's just see how far you can go and that sense of achievement rather than times.
So has it been, would you say that the percentage of runs that you've done over the years has been more trail based than road based?
Um, if you look at the actual amount of races, probably not.
Yeah.
When you look at marathons, definitely. If you look at marathons upwards,
Yeah.
then the majority are probably trails. Although I've done London 8 times, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, over a span of 25 years.
Right. Okay. When was that time you did
Yeah.
London?
Free. So was it before my injury or after? It's probably No, it's probably after. So it must have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe. I managed to get a place again through a beauty of Instagram through with Team Flora. So who
Okay.
sponsor part of it. So they offered me a place to do it. And it was like I think 6 weeks before the event. So I think I wasn't the first one on the list, but obviously someone must have
Yeah.
pulled out. And I was like, well, I was in a reasonable place to do it. I obviously hadn't done specific marathon training, but I managed to get on that. But running with them was a great experience, really.
Yeah. I noticed from your Instagram that a lot of the stuff that you post is the outdoorsy. I call it the outdoorsy stuff. The trails. You know what I mean? The trousy
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
that kind of stuff. So, what would you say to anybody that's potentially let's look at that firstly. What would you say to anybody that potentially maybe wants to do any sort of trail running? Are there any best practices? Anything that you would say?
Um, I think with trail running, I just find trail running more enjoyable. I'll be
Okay.
honest.
Yeah.
I think if you want a bit more relaxed, and I hate to say it, but a friendly environment in terms of a non-competitive environment. I think
Okay.
especially when you go longer, and I know we're not talking just about ultras here, but in a trail race, you find people would be willing to help you if anything happens. You talk, you do that. On a
Right.
road, it's not quite like that. I find it's
Okay.
very super competitive, and if you do proper road races, right, which is where it is. So I think for me, if you're getting into running, trail is actually a good way to start. And I think also, the movement of your body over the trails does help all your muscles because you're not running in a straight impact on the
Yeah.
roads all the time. So I do think there is a benefit to it. I tend to mix up both now, even on my marathon training plan I'm on, some of my long runs just because of the time. I don't get much time on the weekends or the opportunity to do long runs on the weekends.
Yeah.
It's not often my long runs on the weekend, but I run commute to work, which involves 70% on trail to
Okay.
get there.
Right.
So it's a bit of a mix, really.
Okay. Is that something you do every day, the run commute?
No, no. It's I live in Burgess Hill, and it's a commute over South Downs into Brighton. So it's
Right. Okay.
just over 10 miles. Laptop on the back, my clothes. So it's like about 7 kilo. Well, five to 7 kilos, depending what I'm carrying on the day on my back. So it's a very slow run with a big hill in the middle.
Right. Okay.
So I tend to do it twice a week when I'm doing properly. Maybe in marathon training, I've done it probably more once a week, just because it's hard to replicate a marathon plan when you're running 10-minute miles over that sort of terrain when your
Yeah.
plan doesn't kind of cater for that.
Yeah.
So a bit of a mix, but normally 2 or 3 times a week I would do that on the days I need to be in. Saves on the rail fare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What was it that yeah, why not? What was it that made you want to switch back to sort of trying to get faster on, say, your traditional road event?
I think 2 years I fitted a lot. My 8 ultras. I think majority of those have been in the last 2 years, and I think
Oh, really?
yeah. So
Ah,
I
okay.
think in terms of I almost kind of got ultraed out to a certain
Yeah,
extent,
okay, yeah.
if that's a term.
Yeah.
But I think I think I've had some good performances over. It's indicated I could do well on the road. And now, kind of the injury what I had has settled down, and the surgery what I had for it, it doesn't seem to be an issue. I think I realised
Okay.
that. Do you know what? I could still get near some of my times. My
Right.
10k time is totally out of reach, and that's a really odd outlier. If you look at my Instagram profile, it looks weird because my 5k time is a slower pace than my 10k time,
Yes.
because my 10k time was done 20 years ago when there wasn't really any 5ks like parkrun, etc. Whereas my 5k was done 4 years ago when there's a lot of 5ks, right? So it's
Yeah,
kind of
exactly. Yeah.
it looks weird, but the pace, people like. Oh, I've had people say, "Hang on, how comes your 5k is slower than your 10k in comparison?"
Oh, I don't get. I don't. It's weird, isn't it? I'm very similar. Like I was running with somebody once, and they were telling me what their 5K was, and it absolutely blew the socks off mine. But I was something like half hour quicker than them over marathon distance. It's
Yeah,
just it's one of them, isn't it? It's just it's very hard to explain. So, what would you say from a mindset point of view? Because I'm conscious here, like late 40s, injury. I get a lot of people who talk to me and that like they get something happen and they have a bit of a major mental wobble. So what would you say if you're comfortable, Gary, of course, talking about this? What would you say from a mental standpoint you had to do to sort of say, no, I'm gonna get back out and keep going?
it's tough. I think I'm, behind it. I'm quite stubborn, I'd say,
Right.
and I don't like being told I can't do something. Is probably one of the main traits.
Yeah.
I think the injury I had is I basically on the way to work one day I went over. It was in the dark and I was running to work and a car coming behind me and I went to step off what I thought was a verge and it wasn't. It was a hole and I went down.
Right.
And not that I knew. Well, I knew obviously the painful at the time, but it wasn't until 6 months later the issue arose really. But I turned my ankle inwards rather than where you would naturally go outwards.
Right.
And I had I had a couple of months off running then just because it's painful. And then I kind of got back into it for probably 6 months or so. To then all of a sudden it come to a point I just couldn't even weight bear on it. It just becomes so painful, and I
Okay.
ended up going to see physio, and that just made it worse. And in the end, I got kind of through work through medical care, I got to see a ankle someone who specialises in ankles.
Yeah.
And I remember the day I went into this office after I had the MRI and whatever, and he said, "Oh, take a seat. There's a lot going on." I thought, well, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah. No.
Um,
That's it.
and he said basically, he said, "Do you remember which way you went over?" I said, "To be fair, I just went down like a sack of whatever." And it's kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like I didn't realize which way I went. He said, "Well, I can tell that you've gone inwards on it." And he said, "You've got a deltoid ligament on your ankle, which is about 2 centimeters thick." He said, "To be fair, hardly anyone breaks that." He said, "You've ripped that off from the bone and taken a bit of the bone with it." And
Right.
I said to him, "Well, how have I run?" And he's like, "Well, you got another ligament with deltoid, I can't think of the one. The lateral
Yeah.
ligament is you got
Yeah.
three ligaments. That's the second, the third one." He said, if that's just been supporting, and now he said you just ruptured that as well. So that's why you suddenly gone from being able to run for 6 months relatively with pain, but to the point that you can hardly walk on it. He said we can try and reattach both. He said, but at the time, he said, if we get to a point where we can get you to 80% of where you were running previously, he
Yeah.
said that would be a good result. He said, you got to obviously understand that we may not be able to get you to be able to be in the position to run at all. So anyway, he says, to put in perspective, he says, like a lateral ligament reconstruction, he says, I do probably 1 or 2 a week. He said, with a deltoid one, he says it's more like 1 every 2 years. He said it's that rare. And he said,
Oh, right. Okay.
he said, we're fixing both at the same time. And you're the experts putting in perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when I had that one, I was in the boot for 8 weeks, 9 weeks before I even start doing anything else. And I remember I signed off work, and I remember going out for 10-mile walks in this boot, just because I wanted to prove that I could get back. Probably
Because you're stubborn, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and then I think once I come out of the boot, I kind of done all the rehab I was meant to do, very slow build up. I guess for a good 6 months, I wasn't really doing any real running at all. And then when I did start running, it was kind of there and uncomfortable. But since a year after the operation that went by, it become a lot more manageable, and I guess that's 18 months ago now. And my times, I'm way past 80% better. It's like I'm running age grade wise better than I've ever run in my life, and it's like really bizarre. So I kind of guess knowing I'm seeing those stepping stones and those improvements,
Yeah.
has given me the mindset to want to do it more. And I love running so much that I'd do anything to do it, really.
Well, I was going to say I was going to ask that because I know you mentioned that when we spoke prior to the interview. Is that so? What would you put? Because that's quite an amazing turnaround for anyone in their late 40s to go from, a very quite rare by the sound of that injury to knocking out, a 20-odd-year-old PB. So, is it the love of running? Do you think is it that? Because I mean, 'cause the reason why I asked that question is just because I think sometimes people might think, well, I can't run that fast, but I think from my point of view, it's well, anybody can love running. It doesn't matter how fast you run.
Yeah,
You know what I
exactly. I
mean?
agree.
Yeah. So carry on. Sorry. So I
Yeah,
was,
no. Oh, I think you're right. I think it doesn't necessarily. I always say to people on Instagram as well, it's like it's not about your speed. Your speed is your own journey, right? So
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
I can equally look at people who are far quicker than me and say, well, I'm not very good at running, but that's not the way to look at it, right? It's your own journey, and I measure myself against myself now,
Yeah.
and equally, I'm always, even though I PB'd on Sunday, my first thing to do was let's have a look what age grade wise that would have been. And in my 20s and as a senior male, and it's kind of like all it taught me is that as a senior male, I ran nowhere near good enough of what I was capable of,
Yeah. Well,
basically.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it equates to like a 116 half or something like that. And it's kind of, I think there's little targets you can always set yourself,
Yeah.
regardless whether it's that or whether it's like to run the furthest you've ever done, whether it's the quickest, whether it's just to enjoy it. I think running, to me, I know it's a very solo sport, but it's, I think it's great and it's measurable in so many different ways. And
Yeah.
I don't think you should always get caught up on times. I love times. I love catching up with my own times. Equally, I love the trails and completing things and
Yeah.
meeting people, etc. I think there's so many good benefits from it.
Yeah, yeah, cool. So yeah, I agree. I think I've always found it that when I fell into running, because I was never even when I lost all my weight in my late 20s, I didn't really do any running as such. I did little bits on treadmills, and then I got into distance running probably about 5 years after I started my where am I? Yeah, probably about 6, 7 years actually after I started my own weight loss journey. But what I loved about it when I found it over and above just being in the gym was it's really easily measurable. So I always say you can either go faster or further. It's
Yeah,
so simple. You can either go, well, I'll stick at 5K and traps, go faster, or I might want to go further. But I think it's got a lovely measurement to it, and there's always something you can aim for, and there's always a different thing you can go for up to your own limits. So that's what I always loved about it. So what would you, I guess, a few people listening to this will, I mean, the injury thing will definitely sing to a few people who've perhaps had a few setbacks. I think the general thing is, we get, I speak to a lot of people who get the setbacks and they have to deal with the mental side of it. And I think that love of running, I think really is your why, isn't it? You're looking at why do I want to?
yeah. I think the health benefits of it, especially mental health, is a huge thing at the moment. I think I recognise the fact when I can get out and run, I
Yeah.
am a miles better parent, husband, you know, even at work, and people say to me at work, like, oh my god, how do you run that before work and then work the day? But do you know what, I'm far better from doing that than not doing it. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
and I think the benefits definitely outweigh the negatives. I've had a lot of, I've probably had my more than fair share of injuries that should have stopped me. I've had three different like big surgeries due to running stuff. And it's
Oh, right,
kind of
okay.
like, yeah, and it's kind of like, I'm still doing it. So, you can still do it. And I think I will still do it until someone basically chops my legs off, really.
Okay.
Because I want to do it. Because I think, even though it's a hard slog and, everybody has setbacks, but with time, you will get back when it is. And people say to me, is like, oh my God. And they ask you, like, well, how do you cope with 6, 7, 8 weeks off, 2 months, 3 months off, etc. The way I always think of it is, if I'm going to run from when I'm mid-20s to hopefully in my 80s,
Hmm.
that's what, can't do the maths, 55 years, take 6 weeks out of that. How much as a percentage wise are you losing? Not a lot. It seems horrible when you're in it at the time, but in perspective, it's a very, very small chunk
That's very
of
powerful.
your running journey, really. And that's
Yeah.
how I kind of put it in perspective. It is shit when you're in it.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I hate it, and you just want to get running, and I know people like that.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's always another race, there's always another time, and running isn't linear. We go, you know, when I think I put a post on Instagram earlier this week about my Brighton Marathon times, they range from 1 hour, 28 back in 2000 to 2 hours, I think, at one stage, and then all over the place until back to where I am.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of running. You don't always improve. There's bits of a journey what changes it, life changes it as well. But it's good that you can have those kind of different battles throughout to gain what you want to
Yeah.
gain.
I think it can. I think for me as well on that point, I think sometimes that can spoil things. If you always think that I've always had this thing about that you should try and do better. It's my thing. I don't recommend this to people that they've got to follow their own path. But for me, it's always been well, how do you get better? I always want to get better, and I think the one. I'll always remember when I did the London Marathon for the second time because I wanted to make it more memorable. I went off like a rocket thinking I was in conditions. I did. I was like, oh, I got stars in my eyes, but I hadn't trained for the particular pace I was running at. So I got to about 17, 18, and I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a step back and wave at the crowd and do the whole thing instead of trying to be silly and just think that everything's got to be a barnstormer, and it hasn't, has it really? Because you don't. The wonderful expression is that what is it? Run fast, run far, run whatever, but don't ever out love your love of running. Don't ever outrun your love of running, and I think that's important as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's right. And I'm not silly enough to know that this, I'm in a purple patch at the moment, but over 25 years, there's been lots of downs as well as up. So it's kind of like, I
Yeah,
know it's never going to last. So it will be round the corner and I'll have to start again sometime. But in the meantime, enjoy it while it's good.
yeah.
But because it's not always going to be like that.
Thank you. So I think the first thing about the mentality and how to deal with setbacks and injury, I think that's really valuable. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. The second thing, a couple of last questions. One, what I want to ask is if somebody perhaps is, let's keep round numbers. If somebody is 50 plus, the first question I want to ask is how did you prepare any differently for trying to hit that sort of time or on a half marathon? Is there anything you had to do differently being in your 50s?
I think in terms of strength work, obviously, as we mentioned, was
Yeah.
definitely one because previous to this, the only time I ever really went to a gym to do any strength work was to do weights when I'm injured. You don't do it in conjunction with running. I always done
Yeah.
it as an alternative to running when I was injured. But so that is new. Um, I wouldn't say, I don't find a specific or follow a specific diet, etc. I've tended to be, I kind of wanted this year to be a good one. So I've watched my alcohol and stuff like that, which I
Yeah.
probably had a little bit more than I would normally. And I think that's been a change. I've been taking different supplements as well. Um, and yeah, I'm following a structured training plan. That's strangely enough, despite all my running in the previous 25 years, I haven't really ever followed a proper marathon plan, not for any of my marathons. This is the first time I've actually followed a plan, believe it or
Okay.
not. And it's kind of, I kind of, always think, well, I'll do what I think is the right amount of running. Don't get me wrong, I put, some work in, but it was never structured. So I think that has made a difference. And I think that's important as well, being an older athlete. I don't think I can wing it as much as I probably used
Right.
to, and I also am very um, not cautious, but I feel a lot about rest days as well, because
Yeah.
I find that the recovery is so much harder at the moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I
that's the
think,
big one. Yeah.
and I've had a really tough this week after Brighton half, more than I've ever felt. It feels like I've done a marathon, and I was like, I've not felt that for a while. So I'm very conscious I've probably taken the load down more than the plan said, just because of that. Whereas, in your 20s or 30s, you don't tend to worry about it. You go out the next day and do it all again. But I can't do that now. And I guess when I was that age, I was like, when I get to 50, I'm not gonna be that person. I'm not gonna need that recovery time. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna keep running and be fine. But it doesn't work like that. I'm there now, and honestly, it doesn't. So you
No,
need
no.
to. I think you just need to look after yourself a little bit more as you get older.
Yeah. You mentioned supplements. What do you take out of interest?
So I take creatine.
Yeah.
I take. I was approached by a company called they're branded Eight, which apparently it's a solution what you put in and mix it with water, but it allows more oxygen to be absorbed. And
Okay.
I'll be honest, I get approached a lot for supplements and things through Instagram, and I'm always a bit worried. But something about this one, I thought I'd try it, and honestly, I do feel better for it in terms of being able. When I'm running, it's not the cardio side that I'm struggling with; it's my legs, if anything. But they use it as a recovery as well, and I find taking that has helped. I can't tell you what's in it because I don't know; it could be anything, but it seems to be working.
So is
But
that with the way you explain that to me, is that something that's going to help improve like VO2 max? Am I?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm doing some simple studies on the Garmin, but you can see on the same session that your oxygen absorption is better, and I
Okay.
feel like recovery is better when I'm taking it.
Okay.
So
Which Garmin is that on that does that? Which one have you got?
so I've got the Phoenix. I'm gonna say 7. I think
Seven.
it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The quite. I've just got the 265, and there's some. Yeah, you can geek out a little bit, can't you? There's some decent stuff on there, and
Oh yeah, it's there's so much on that. I kind of live by heart rate variability as well, which tells
yeah,
me, and I think that is a really is there is a lot of useless stats on there as well. Well, I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but I think that one is a really good guide that it does tell you this week it's gone down for like a week into the red, and I feel that without even looking at it,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
can tell. I think it is a good guide to when you need to kind of slow down a little bit.
yeah.
But yeah.
My resting heart rate went up by I've tracked that for a while, so that's an important measure of rest and recovery. And mine, I'm tapering now, so mine went up by 3 points, and I was like,
Right.
that's a sit. Yeah, that's quite a big. I mean, some people say like it has to go up by 5 or 10, but for me, it went up by 3 to 4, and that's quite a swing. And I was like, right, that's telling me that I'm tired. And
Yeah.
that's telling me that I need to recover a little bit, which is obviously ironic because I'm tapering, so it gives me that chance to do it. But I think those little things, I think sometimes get missed in when people get obviously everyone's getting obsessed about this zone two stuff, and people are forgetting that actually I think there's some better metrics that people aren't tracking than just jumping on one and saying that's the be all and end all. For me, VO2 and actually resting heart rate, I class as more. That's just me, but I class those two as more important because I think they take into account your recovery as well. So
Yeah, totally agree.
that yeah, that's what I've always looked at as my two measures because I think you have to, and especially as an older athlete, let's just call a spade a spade. By the way, if anyone, in case anyone doesn't know, I'm 48 in 4 months. As an older athlete, I think you're tracking your recovery as well as your performance is
It's
massive
key. Yeah.
because you can't mess around when you're this age. Your recovery will just wipe you out.
I think my mind tells me something different. I get all these great ideas in my head.
Yeah,
But I could do this, and this, and this. But my
yeah,
body is on the opposite end of the scale, saying no, you can't. You
yeah,
can't do this,
yeah.
which gets me into some silly events. But it's kind of like,
Right.
but yeah, you do need to listen to your body
You do.
usually.
That's a big, big bit of advice. Yeah. So, final question, Gary, conscious of times. Final question for me.
Right.
If anybody's listening to this who perhaps is in that part, is in that sort of station of life that we are at, sort of say mid to late 40s, maybe even early 50s, and perhaps they are thinking about sort of maybe even starting a running journey, or maybe even thinking maybe potentially like even something like a marathon or an ultra in the future, what advice would you give to them?
I think, if you're starting out, at whatever age, it's going to be a huge health benefit to you, right? And
Yeah.
I think people, if you're 50 and you haven't done it, as long as you follow a structured, I wouldn't say necessary plan, but as long as you don't go silly and you build up slowly, the benefits to your health is going to be huge, right? And I think
Yeah.
you are capable of it. Anyone can do it if you are sensible.
Yeah.
And I think the health benefits, if you're starting out, it will be tough to start with. It's tough at any age to start with if you've not run
Yeah,
before.
of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And I do say to people, what I know is what starting out, if you get past the first couple of weeks, it does get easier as such, because
Mm.
those first 2 weeks, every day is you're aching because your body's just not used to it. But I do feel, age shouldn't be a limit to it. I think also if you haven't run before and you're 50 and you start to do it, you got more opportunity than I have being a runner in the 50s who's run all my life. So you're going to feel the difference a lot more than probably I'm feeling the difference, because that's negligible, right?
Yeah.
So I think I would definitely say start simply, start slowly, just build up. Couch to 5K, I think is great.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of plans out there, and don't go silly and don't get despondent when it again where you don't have that linear journey. But I think you end up, if you stick with it, a better, healthier person, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of people I've spoken to since I've started doing what I'm doing, trying to help people over 35, because that's when I started. The amount of people, honestly, I'm getting messages. I'm doing my first marathon. I'm 67, and
Yeah,
I just think it's
amazing.
incredible. Yeah, it's incredible, and I think it's changed a little bit because when you were doing your PBs, I was the unhealthiest I've ever been in my life, so it's quite, I've gone the other way. And I just think now it's so inspiring to me to see people doing it later, because number one, I think it's more important to do it later because that's when you're more likely to have problems when you're older. So it's probably better to discover it when you're old. Because like you said, recovery, even though I was massively out of shape, I was playing five-a-side football on two Benson and Hedges and a Mars bar. You know what I mean? At the age of 25, because you couldn't you? So
Yeah.
that was my thing. But I think it's even more important. So hopefully, from that, you've got the fact that if you are in that age and you are actually even tempted to just maybe start, or even you've got visions of saying, I'd love to tick a marathon, because I know that's a lot of people's sort of apex is the marathon. I want to tick that off my bucket list. Then yeah, why not? If you can come back from pretty serious injury to do it and still be knocking out PBs in your early 50s, and I think why not? Why not?
And I think there's people new to running at this age, and there's the old school, as in me, and decent club runners in the '80s booms, I guess.
Yes.
But the quality of an older athlete these days is absolutely immense. It's like Brighton Half Marathon, for instance, 1:28, and I think 29th in my age
Yeah, that's
category of
frightening, isn't
50
it?
or over, and
That's
I'm like,
frightening.
so that's I think I've run almost killing myself
Yeah.
to find that
Yeah.
26 50-year-olds have run faster than me.
Yeah. I can't remember when I did my sub three at Manchester. I can't remember. It was quite low. I mean, it wasn't ridiculous. I was
Yeah,
decent, obviously being 40, I was 45 when I did it, but it was quite, I was like, I was expecting like delusions of grandeur, like top 10, nowhere near. I'll always remember actually one of my incentives was I remember running the last mile was a little bit sort of down the hill as you go back towards, because it was finishing at Old Trafford then. I just remember looking to my left, Gary, and I saw two blokes running, and they must have been in their 60s going at my pace.
yeah.
And I thought, if they're doing it, I thought, I'm doing it. And it was quite, I think the year before I did it, someone broke the record. A 62-year-old did like a 2:30, and it's just like,
Gives
and
me hope.
you think you're a badass, and
Yeah.
someone like that rocks up and just knocks the socks off. So, okay, well, thank you very much, Gary. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other tips? Anything else you'd like to add this evening for the listeners or anything like that? No.
No, I think it's great. I think the only thing I'll say is I think social media is, to me, has had a positive impact. I know
Yes.
in terms of that isn't the same journey, and I think more so for women, or some women, that's not always positive. But I think generally
Yes.
for me, it's been great. It's given me opportunities I've never had. I think I've met some fantastic people doing this, for instance. I've done a few podcasts now, and I love talking about running, as you can
Yes.
tell.
Yeah, you can see that. Yeah.
But just meeting people, I've met far more people like face to face, and are friends now, which I would never have met in that journey. So I do feel, I think running's going through another boom, and I think it's a bit with a younger generation generally at the moment, but I think they can drag the older people new to running in it. I think it's, for me, it's always had a positive space. So just be encouraged. Don't listen to anyone what may be negative. If you're out there running, it's got to be a positive thing, right?
Marvelous, marvelous. How you feeling about Brighton Marathon?
Yeah, it's like I said earlier. The further I go, the slower I go in comparison. I want
Right.
a PB. I want a PB. My PB currently is 3:24.
Okay.
So based on a 1:28 half, I should be pissing it. But
Well,
it's
it is weird though. It's you
yeah,
can't think like that. Because people have said to me, you can't. Sorry to me, but
yeah, it's right.
such a weird. I can't think about. I can't think about it because if I, I just don't. I don't even think about my half time because it's fairly. I think it's fairly irrelevant because
Yeah.
marathons about you. It's a different bit. I know people say it's obvious, it's longer, but it is a completely different
I
beast.
look at the pace and I think, how am I going to do that when I look at my average pace? I know,
Yeah.
I should be old enough. Well, I am old enough to think that I should be able to
Yeah.
trust in the process in terms of, you run slower to run faster in a day is the easy way to think of it. But it's kind of like, I'm not quite believing that yet. But saying that, my 10K and my half marathon are two of my other goals this year, and I've done those. So if I did
Who knows?
fail, then I'm
Who knows?
happy. I'm happy with it. But we'll see. We'll see on the day.
Well, best of British with it, and again, thank you very much for taking the time out to talk
Right.
to me tonight. So let's get this right. So it's GB_runner 2021 on Instagram. That's the one with GB_runner 2021. Gary Blackman on Instagram. So get over and give Gary a follow, please. Give Gary some love over there. He posts some really, really good motivational, supportive content, which I like. So make sure that you give Gary a follow and watch his journey as he goes, particularly you runners who are, again, at our station in life. Please do that because I think it's been very, very useful. And thank you, Gary, for your insights into that. It's been very useful. And the injury stuff as well, because again, a lot of people that I sort of come across occasionally do struggle sometimes as they're getting a little bit older with niggles and it's more serious. So that's good from a mindset point of view. So thank you very much for doing that. So firstly, don't forget to give Gary a follow. I will drop, obviously, Gary's handle in the description and the show notes of the podcast as well, so you can click on that and go and follow him over there. Don't forget to follow me as well, 12 Months to Marathon. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. I do appreciate that. The likes and the reviews, particularly on Spotify, really help me. So if you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to head over there and support me over there. I really do appreciate it. So thank you again, Gary, for your time. Thanks, everybody else. And I'll look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you, Gary.